Welcome to the Kernel of Truth. Welcome back to our program. I'm Colonel Conrad Reynolds, and we got a great show for you tonight. I want to really talk about Arkansas and particularly one county that was brave enough last year to step up and say, you know what, we're going to do paper ballots. We think it's a smart thing to do, and we're going to do it. We had one county, by the way, Cleveland County, but they reneged on it later on for various reasons. But there was one county in 2023 that said, we're going to go to paper ballots, regardless of all the naysayers and all the sky's going to fall. We think that we can make that happen. And, for people who don't know, Searcy County has a long-standing reputation of being one of the most conservative counties in the state of Arkansas. Even when the Democrats ruled for 140 years, even in the Clinton days, Searcy County was a Republican county, very conservative. And so it doesn't surprise me that they are the ones that would be the first to go out, the tip of the spear, if you will, to be the first county in paper ballots. But it doesn't happen just because you want it to happen. You got to have people that are knowledgeable, smart, who are willing to do the research and study to be able to convince other people who aren't willing to do that work, who just simply listen to people trying to convince them that the machines are the best thing in the world. Searcy County was lucky to have somebody like that. Her name is Laurie Gross, and Laurie Gross is somebody who was the election commissioner, still is, of Searcy County. And she listened to the arguments. In fact, it wasn't long when I went up there and spoke. I remember Laurie coming up to me and having 1,000 questions. And she said, I'm the election commissioner here, and I would really like to learn more about what you're doing. And so we pointed her in the right directions. We gave her stuff where she could read. And boy, she took it on like you wouldn't believe. And so we're going to have her as our guest here in just a minute. And because I want you to hear, not from me and not from Will or anybody else, someone who's actually put the paper ballot process in action in her county this year for the primary in 2024. But it started way back in 2023. So I'm going to bring her on. Laurie, are you there?
I'm
there
here.
you are. Oh, great.
Hey, Conrad.
Well, thank you so much for coming on our show. And it is an honor and a privilege to have you with us, because you're one of the few people who really understand, because you actually have done it now, how paper ballots really impact a county and their budget, and what things could be better and what things could be worse. But the most important thing is paper ballots practical. We're going to talk about that. But your journey started last year. After we had our little presentation, you decided to do a study. Can you tell us about what happened? I guess that was July of last year. Is that right?
I think you came to Searcy County in June and you did a presentation. And I was intrigued because I was coordinator the previous election cycle. And when you came in was my first year as commissioner. And I was intrigued because you presented some information that I had never heard before. And our whole team, the other commissioners, the people that we were working with, even some of our JPs that we were talking to about elections, were really interested in making sure that we did a good job with our election, that people were confident in the process, that people were represented in the process, that it was a quality election. And then here you came in with all this information about machines and about paper ballots, and you sort of threw us for a loop at that point. At least me, you did.
Yeah. And then so from that point on, by the way, just so everybody knows, every county in Arkansas has 3 commissioners. And there's typically, since Republicans are in charge, we have 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat commissioner for every county, correct? Was that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
And so y'all, go ahead.
Yes, and most counties also have a coordinator, and for many counties, the coordinator is full-time from year to year. The commissioners change or might change every 2 years. Often the coordinator is the person who kind of runs the election from year to year.
Yeah, they're the one with all the knowledge that they transcend all the people who come in and out, because a lot of the commissioners, I mean, all of them are appointed by their party, correct? Their county party?
That's correct.
Okay. So, and so the coordinator is the one that really and truly has the background, the history of how things went, and really the process of how to do it, correct?
In most counties, that's the case, where they have a coordinator who is on the job year round. That was not the case in our county. We don't have the budget for a full-time position or even a part-time position all year. So I would say that I did not know a lot, but I don't think that that's unusual for commissioners who are new and coming in. So based on what you said to us, I think I did bombard you with lots and lots of questions. And then after you left, we stayed in touch, and I kept saying, feed me the information. I want to see what your sources are. I want to vet those sources. I want to see what's really going on, because we wanted to make sure that we had an election that was a quality election, that was transparent for the voters, and that ensured that every vote counted the way that the voter intended for the vote to count. And once I started looking at the research and checking out the sources, I realized how insecure the voting machines were. I mean, most election officials, we like the voting machines. They're easy. They seem to be a lot easier than going to the trouble of hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballots. So for me, as a commissioner, I was thinking, I have to be absolutely convinced that going to paper ballots is the right thing before I start talking to anybody else about the possibility. When I got to that point, I was talking to some JPs, and our JPs were very interested in looking at the possibility, because in this state, counties have the right by law to choose to either use the express vote machines, the electronic vote machines, or to go with paper ballots. So the JPs, the quorum court, and the justices of the peace on the quorum court, they're the ones in each county who decide whether the county uses the machines or goes with paper ballots. So we began talking to our quorum court, and in their wisdom, they said, we don't want you to just come in and present this to us and suddenly we've got to vote yes or no. We want data. And so they challenged, the quorum court decided to put together a committee to research the viability of paper ballots. How much was it going to cost? How much more was it going to cost? Was it going to save us money? Was it even practical at this point? And so we had a committee of 6 appointed by the quorum court. I was on the committee. One of our other the Democrat representative on the commissioners on the commission was on that committee. We had JP on the committee and several others from different places around the county. And we really, really looked at the numbers. We really crunched the numbers. We looked at what everything would cost. We factored it out. We looked at what was possible, how it might be done, and we presented a fairly in-depth report to the court. It took us 2 months. They asked us to come back in a month. We didn't have all the data. It was very difficult getting the data that we needed from either the state or from ES&S. When we finally got the data that we could get, we presented everything that we had found to the quorum court. And at that point in time, we were missing, there are typically 9 on our quorum court. One JP had dropped out because of illness, so we had 8 JPs. 6 said yes, we want to go with paper ballots. 2 said no.
All right. Well, then the resolution then passed. It was a resolution.
They passed a resolution.
And what most people, I just want to make sure that everybody listening to this program understand that ES&S is Election Systems and Software, right. And they're the company that out of Nebraska that runs all the elections in the state of Arkansas as far as their machines are concerned. They're in all 75 counties, and they are selected by the Secretary of State. Whatever machine that the Secretary of State decides that you have to use, if you're going to use machines, the Secretary of State is the one who dictates that and says, well, if you're going to use machines, you got to use the one that I selected. And he's selected and has selected ES&S for many years. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. And those are the machines that we have in our county.
Right. Now, you said you did the report. And so,
Right.
and I would like to know, I know you probably don't have it in front of you, but if you could kind of give us a general idea of you have it?
I don't have it right in front of me.
That's okay. I was going to tell you, page 3, paragraph. No, I'm just joking. What I'd like for you to do is just kind of give a summary of the findings. What did your report tell you? How did it lead you as far as exactly what y'all voted on? What was it that you used to persuade the quorum court to vote yes on this resolution to go to paper ballots?
I think there were 3 areas that really moved the JPs on our quorum court. They definitely cost was a huge issue. And once I began doing the research, I realized how much an election cost each county. And a lot of the cost is based on the requirements that we have to use certain services from ES&S, and they're not cheap. And in our little county, some of the services we are required to purchase from ES&S are services that we never use.
For example,
we have to purchase the services, but we don't use them. For instance, we have to spend a little less than $2,000 to have the ballot recorded for people who cannot see. But we never, ever, ever, no one ever requests to use those earphones with the recorded ballot. They bring a relative to read the ballot to them. And so they don't even want to use the earphones, but we are required to do that. We are required. I don't want to go into it. I know we don't have enough time, but I began seeing all of the things that we were required to purchase from ES&S and how much, like layout, for instance, how much the layout of our ballots cost.
Well, layout, and you mean the design of the actual ballot style? The design
of the actual ballot. Yes, the ballot styles and the ballot faces. And having been in marketing for many years, I know how much certain things cost from a printer. And so I knew that these are exorbitant prices. And I got curious. I wanted to know, what would it, if we were not required to use any voting machines, if we could do everything on paper, and if we could purchase those services like printing, layout, printing, that sort of a thing in our county, from sources in our county, what would it cost to be just paper ballots? And I figured it out based on how many ballots were voted in our county the previous election in 2022. What would it have cost per ballot? And okay, I'm rounding off the numbers, but I think it was right around $6 per ballot that was voted if we didn't use any of the machines, if we did everything in-house, so to speak, or in county. Then I looked at what we actually spent per ballot in 22. It was about $19 per ballot.
Wow.
And then I went back and I figured, okay, now there are laws and we have to comply with certain laws. So there are certain things we have to do that won't allow us to just go bare bones, paper ballot, purchasing those services in our own county. So realistically speaking, if we decided to go with hand-marked, hand-counted paper ballots, what would it cost us? And over a period of time, the savings would end up being about, I think,
you know what?
I'm really pulling this out of the back of my
hold
head.
on a second.
Do you have it?
No, I don't. But you know what? I got about 15, 20 seconds. We're going to take a break. And then I want the audience to be in suspense, because I want you to be able to tell them how much money that the difference, the cost, and how much you could save if we went to an all paper ballot, and paper, and get rid of these machines. And we're paying an exorbitant amount, just like you said, in order to have an electronic device count our votes. But we'll be right back with Laurie Gross. We'll be right back in just a few minutes after you hear from our sponsors. Thank you. Welcome back to the Kernel of Truth. I'm Colonel Conrad Reynolds, your host, and we are continuing on our conversation with Laurie Gross, who is the election commissioner out of Searcy County. And they went to paper ballots, and she was telling us in the last segment about her study and what she found out about last year before they ever went to paper ballots. When they went to the quorum court to present their findings, there was a report that they did, a very extensive, exhaustive report comparing machines to paper ballots. What did you find out? I mean, you told us paper ballots, but you were going to tell us the cost, and that one. And I wanted to make sure we get cost per voter, not cost for the paper ballot, just per voter.
Right. So let me be clear. The way that I figured my numbers was I looked at the number of ballots that were cast in the 22 election, and I took those numbers and I broke it down to what does it cost not per vote, but per ballot that was cast. Per voter who voted.
Got it.
In that election. And that year we spent about $18. I said 19, but it's $17.92 per voter who voted. If we had the same election with the same number of voters, but we were able to cut out ES&S and cut out all of the technology and use paper ballots, it would cost a little over $6 per voter. And what it ended up, the cost of going to paper ballots and staying with the ES&S and the machines that we do have to use by law, it ends up being about $12.70 per voter. So it's less. It's not what I think it should be, but it's much less. And people say, how can that be? It's a number that is figured over time, because in the very near future, we're going to have to replace our voting machines. They've got computers and they're becoming obsolete. Other states are already replacing the machines that we currently have with the next generation of those voting machines. And by the way, having a lot of trouble with them. And so what we explain to our JPs is, if you will commit to the long term, you will end up with significant savings when we have to go back and purchase new machines.
And what we're talking about when we say new machines, just so everybody understands, these are the touchscreen computers that you use right now, the touchscreens, and then the tabulators, where you have to put the ballot through to tabulate the touchscreen, the ballot that comes out of that. And that's what we're talking about. If we can eliminate that, those electronic devices, which we don't really need, particularly in a smaller county like yours, all these additional expenses just skyrocket your cost. You said to almost $18 per voter versus $6 if we were to go back to paper ballots. And it's very doable in your county. Especially the smaller counties could easily do it, but right now you're still having a savings. So, you said 12 something, so you're almost $6 a voter cheaper. But I thought it was going to skyrocket your cost. I thought it was going to bankrupt your county. That's what everybody said. It was going to bankrupt the counties if they went to paper ballots.
There was a lot of negative comments. Look, I'm trying to be nice because I know some of those people out there, and they're good people. They care about elections, and they believe that they're right. And I didn't know the difference until like you said, I went into this deep dive looking at the data that's out there. And I feel very strongly about secure elections. And I'm convinced from the research, from what the true experts, the cybersecurity experts say, that you cannot count on these express vote machines to accurately reflect the voter's intent. Many times I'm sure it does. However, you can't count on it. And, when we started talking about going to paper ballots in our county, I had people come out of the woodwork, awesome people who told me literally horror stories about, back in the day when boxes of paper ballots floated down the river and cars stopped in somebody's garage and they exchanged one box of ballots for the other, and all the ways that people cheated with paper ballots. And all that did was confirm for me the fact that there will be a certain segment of people who, if they can, will cheat in an election. And the cybersecurity experts proved to me that the express vote machines were not secure enough for me to be able to trust them, that they wouldn't be used by one of those nefarious individuals. I don't know if they've ever been used to cheat. Maybe they never have. The problem is the potential is there. if paper ballots are handled correctly, and we spent hours and hours working out a method by which we could make sure that those paper ballots were secure, that the chain of custody was unbroken, that we could document every voter and every paper ballot. We met for weeks and weeks, our team, brainstorming and trying to work that out to make sure that our paper ballot system would be secure and would be transparent. And would be transparent.
Well, I know that you went through a tremendous amount of preparation with your team, with the other commissioners, trying to make sure that all the possibilities of malfeasance would make sure that didn't happen. And also, you went to Phoenix. And you watched what they did in Arizona there with the Republican committee and how they handled the paper ballot elections there. What did you learn out of that helps you in Searcy County?
Up until that time, of course, we didn't have any help with knowing how to move the paper ballots through the system, how to keep that real tight, indisputable kind of quality control, but also chain of custody. And then as we're counting, how do you move it along? Because even in our small county, it's still a lot of ballots, and you need to get them counted quickly and efficiently. So we had worked through some of the steps. We had developed some accounting sheets for chain of custody and for follow-up and for documentation. But we had a couple of areas where we just weren't sure. How do you bridge this, for instance? So when I was invited to go watch the process in Phoenix, I jumped at it. I did it on my own time. I did it in my own way. The county didn't pay anything for it. I just wanted to be trained because we wanted to do it right. And it was just a fast turnaround trip, but I watched how they had worked out some of especially the chain of custody issues that we were still grappling with. And I also looked at some of their paperwork, some of their, what I would say, accounting, recording paperwork. And it really, at that point, everything just started falling into place. And I began to get a really good picture of what it looks like to handle those ballots from beginning to end.
Well, I want to talk about that a little bit more, because I think that the process that they had there, of course, I watched that too. And what I saw was they had worked out a really, really good system that included, 4 people at the table, I think it was. They had cameras. They had ways to double check. They had scanners, double-siding scanners to make sure they scanned everything. But they had a really good way of making sure that every vote was counted, but that, again, as you just said, chain of custody was first and foremost. So that there was no way that they would be able to get fake ballots in because they all had secure paper. But we'll talk a little bit more about that after the break. I want you to expand on it just a little bit before we move on. But we'll be right back. I'm Colonel Conrad Reynolds with the Kernel of Truth, and we'll be right back in just a few minutes. All right, welcome back to the Kernel of Truth. I'm Colonel Conrad Reynolds, back with our special guest, Laurie Gross, who is the election commissioner up in Searcy County. And we were talking about their process and the journey that they've gone through in order to get to paper ballots. And it was very interesting. And she went to Arizona, to Phoenix, to watch them do I guess it's a local Republican Party voting with paper ballots. And then she brought all that knowledge back. They put it in place with her team, and then here we are now at primary day, March 5th, I guess it was, 4th, where you did the primary. Explain to us how that went.
Well, I will say that we had some anxiety, maybe too strong a word, and it may not be strong enough, because we had so many people tell us it wasn't going to work, it couldn't be done, it was all going to be chaos. We weren't going to be able to keep track of things. We really, from the powers that be, let's just say that there was no encouragement at all, and our JPs were under a lot of pressure to vote no. They were told they were going to bankrupt the county. The election cost way too much. They weren't going to be able to make it happen. It was going to be chaos and confusing. But our team had put in the time. We spent time training our poll workers. They knew what to expect. We have some great people in our county working with us. I'm telling you, our poll workers, they all deserve medals. They're just such awesome people, and they got behind the effort. We just started going to our friends, our neighbors, and saying, hey, we're going to need help counting, because the state had made it clear they were not going to reimburse us for the extra payroll cost of having people count ballots. More than half of the people who came out and said, I want to help be a counter, they signed an affidavit saying they didn't want to get paid.
Wow.
They wanted to do it because they felt it was the right thing. They were so gung-ho. They were so encouraging as we worked to figure it out. So we prepared. We didn't just say, well, I hope it all works out. We did the legwork, and we had great people working with us. So when it came down to the primary, we were ready, and it was smooth. It was paper ballots are easy. Machines get glitched. People don't know how to use the machines. Papers get stuck. They come unplugged when you're not looking, and then their battery runs out. It's just a constant issue all along the way. You only have so many machines. So then if you have too many people waiting to vote, they have to stand in line for quite a while waiting for the machines. But with paper ballots, you just add a couple of more privacy, those little cardboard privacy booths on the table. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I'm going to say, I would like for you to explain and have a word picture for our radio listeners here.
Okay.
A word picture of what's the process? I call it the AVII hand count process, but also I just want to talk about the voting process. When someone comes in and they want to vote, quickly explain that process to them and how that compares to the machines.
Well, when they come in and you have paper ballots, the ballot is already printed for them to read. And we set up tables around the room with those 3-sided cardboard privacy panels. Everybody's seen one at one time or another. And we had extra ones in case we had a line. You can always add another place at a table for someone to sit down and fill out a paper ballot. They take their ballot, they sit down, they fill in the bubbles with their hand. And now they know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, they have indicated which candidate they want to vote for because it's right there. They filled it in with their pen. It's interesting because we had so many people telling us how much better the express vote machines are. But if you think about it, the express vote machine, which the old ones cost about $4,000. I understand that the new ones to replace these are right around $8,000. I know I'm rounding off numbers.
Wow.
But really, all they do is they record a vote. So they're nothing more than a pen in a way. And so it costs a whole lot less just to buy an ink pen to record the voter's vote. They take their vote, they put it into the ballot box, and they're done. It's so quick. It's so simple. One of our JPs who actually voted against paper ballots, we talked to him the day after the election when we were counting the paper ballots. He came in to watch the process. We asked him, we said, well, did you vote the machine? Because we had a machine set up at every polling place because the law requires it. And we asked him, did you vote with the machine or did you vote with the ballot? And he said, well, I used the paper ballot. And we said, but you didn't want to go paper ballots. Why did you use the paper ballot? He said, well, paper ballots are a lot easier. So I think that says a lot.
Well, I think it does. It says a great deal. And so election day, you got through election day and the sky didn't fall in on you, right?
No, it was actually quite lovely. All of our poll workers said to me at one point or another, they said, gosh, it's so relaxed using paper ballots. There's so much less stress. Everybody's so easygoing. They were really pleased about it. So of course, we had to run, because it's a law, we had to run all the ballots through the DS200s, which are the tabulators. They count the ballots and get a printout so that that evening, we have to have a preliminary count. So we did that. And then we scheduled our actual counting of our hand count of the paper ballots. We scheduled it for the day after the election. That's when all of our volunteers who had been training to count, using some of the techniques that we learned when I was in Phoenix and some others that we established on our own. And we had 5 tables with 5 people at each table counting ballots. And it took us about, trying to remember, right around 5 hours to count all of our ballots.
Now, just so the audience knows, county, after election night, when you ran them through the tabulator, what did you do with the ballots after that? You had to secure them, right?
We did. We were very conscious of that. So we had tubs that had secure locks on them, and each batch of ballots from each polling place, after they were run through the tabulator, were put in that box with the tabulator paperwork and with some other paperwork like voter lists and that sort of a thing. And we locked them, and they went straight to the vault in our county clerk's office. And they stayed there until the commissioners went there the next morning. The vault was open, and we took them to the courtroom where we were going to count them.
Right.
Still locked.
Right. And it's still locked. In other words, even though they were in the vault, they still had individual security tabs on them, so that even if someone got in the vault, they would have to break those tabs to do anything. So you had 100% secure physical security of the ballot, and then you hand counted them. You got through them in what you said, 5.5 hours or whatever. Let me ask you
about that.
How close, and I haven't asked you this, I'm just curious, how close was the hand count to the machine count that you had the night before?
It was very close. The only difference was that there were a handful, I think fewer than 10 ballots that were not filled out in a way that the tabulator could read them. In other words, instead of filling the bubble all the way with a solid bubble of ink, people might have checked them or X'd them, or in a couple of places, they marked one that they didn't want. They X'd through that, and they marked the one that they did want. The machine doesn't recognize any of that. The tabulator doesn't. But when you're hand counting, you can recognize voter intent. And of course, the state says that if you have to determine what was voter intent, all three commissioners have to look at it and agree and sign it the way that it was counted. And so we had a handful of those ballots, and that was the difference between the machine count and the hand count.
Wow. So I guess we can say that voter intent was captured probably 100% in your election, which we can't say the same at all based on all the experts' opinion when it comes to the machines. Well, listen, we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to come right back because I got to ask you some more questions. This is extremely interesting, and I know our listeners are loving it. I'm Colonel Conrad Reynolds. We'll be right back after a few messages from our sponsors. All right, welcome back to the Colonel of Truth. I'm Colonel Conrad Reynolds, your host. Again, we're in our last segment with our special guest, Laurie Gross, who is the election commissioner up in Searcy County. And for those of you who don't know, Searcy County was the one brave little county out of all 75 that decided to use paper ballots for this last election. And it went off perfectly. Laurie, thank you for joining and being on our show. What you've said already has been incredible. And I think every county needs to listen to what you just said. Everybody up to include the Secretary of State and our governor. They need to understand that what y'all have done is basically paved the way for every other county. And we were talking about in the last segment about paper ballots and hand counting, something that everybody said it's impossible to do. Could you run through the process so everybody listening can understand what y'all did? And you said it went smoothly. Explain that, will you?
As I said, we had already spent a lot of time training. We met 3 or 4 times with the teams that were going to count. So they knew what to expect. It's not quite the same. But one of the things that we really wanted to do was make sure everyone could see what we were doing. So we were in one of the courtrooms. So we were in an open space. There was a barrier between the audience and the counters, but we had invited everyone. The front door was open and people came and went. There was a lot of seating so they could watch. We had a camera on every table, and the camera was then, there were screens on the wall. So whatever the camera saw on each table, anyone in the room could also see. We had scanners. So whenever we took a batch of ballots to count, we put them in the scanner so they were digitally recorded. We also had really worked hard to let our team members know you can't bring a purse, you can't bring a phone, you can't bring a pen into that area where the ballots were. We used green pens green and red pens on the tables to tally the votes, because we wanted to make sure no one ever suspected that a vote was changed, or if someone didn't vote for a candidate, that someone filled in that vote. Those were all things that people said, oh, that can happen with paper ballots, and it could if you aren't careful. Like I said early on in our discussion, there are probably a very small percentage, but there is a percentage of people who will cheat if they can. And so we did our best to make sure that there was just no way for that to happen. And so everything was very transparent, I guess probably is the best word that I would use.
I want to explain. I want you to explain the green and red pen, because for people not really thinking because most people aren't cheaters and they're not thinking about that. What you're saying is that the other people who filled them in with a black pen, correct?
Yeah.
And you want to make sure there was nobody had a black pen so they could fill in another oval and then discount that vote. So with red and green pens, you can't do that. So, and you made sure that was all that they had, and they're not allowed to bring anything inside the area. So I think that's brilliant. I think that's very, very smart. But continue. I just wanted the audience to know that.
Well, I feel like between the cameras and the scanners, and by the way, there was a camera that was literally at each table looking down at the ballots as they were called out or counted. We had 2 people tallying, in other words, writing down the count. And we had 2 people who were calling it, one who was actively calling, one sitting beside them who was looking to make sure they called the vote accurately. So everything was doubled up. And then it was the talliers compared each tally sheet to make sure that they had the same numbers. And the video recording of those ballots is available. There's a website. I can't tell you exactly where it is, but you can go to a website, you can look it up, and you can actually watch as the count goes on and every one of those tables all day long. It's recorded.
Yeah, and they're, if I'm not mistaken, aren't they calling out the tally as they go through, so that if there's a mistake, they can go back and say, okay, there was a problem here. And in other words, as they go through this stack of ballots, they're calling them out. Is that correct?
That is correct. They'll go down. There's a tally sheet that has all the names that are on the ballot. And so the caller will call out loud the name that is voted on that particular ballot. You have 2 talliers. They're writing it down. And when they get to a certain number for that name, they'll say tally. The other one says tally yes for that name. So they're checking each other all the time. And we counted in groups of 25. And so if for some reason they didn't come up with the correct tally, all we had to do was go back and look at those 25 ballots.
Got it.
Batches.
And the
25.
camera then also that image of that ballot is put on a screen where anybody else watching and observing can see exactly what they're counting. It's really a great process. We felt that it was a good merger of what we wanted to do and added to what we saw done in Phoenix, which was so well thought out, so well considered. And, I really think that the big problem is that a lot of people don't understand how easy it is to do paper ballots, because it hasn't been done our country was built on using paper ballots for elections, but in the last handful of years, people aren't really used to that anymore, not hand counting the paper ballots. And I feel like it's just a matter of education. And I want to make a point before we're finished here. In our county, the County Democrat Committee and the County Republican Committee both passed resolutions supporting the use of paper ballots. And we had, as counting judges, a Democrat and a Republican working together. Our JPs, 6 out of 8 voted to go paper ballots. There was once the information was available and people had the facts before them, it was easy for them to say, you know what, paper ballots make a lot of sense. And for people who care about security, integrity, and transparency, paper ballots are really the only choice. Well, you're exactly right, and I agree with you 1,000%. In fact, the people of Arkansas were never asked if they wanted to use machines. That was forced upon them by the higher ups. They forced machines on everybody in the state of Arkansas, and even though they say you can go to paper ballots if you want, I think that you experienced, along with people in Cleveland County, if you choose to do so, there's going to be a lot of pressure. A lot of post-election pressure, pre and post. Can you talk about that a little bit, about the kinds of pressure that was put on, particularly your county? I think they asked a bunch of questions under FOIA, and they are trying to let you say it. What's going on with any kind of pressure?
I want to preface this conversation by saying that there are some people that I work with at the state level for the County Board of Commissioners that over the years have been extremely helpful. Mm-hmm. They're really awesome people. I have a lot of admiration and respect for them. And I want to preface this conversation by saying that because there are good people out there. There are just a handful, and I can't even tell you where some of them were with the AAC, some of them were Secretary of State's office, some of them were who knows where they came from, other JPs. Our JPs and our county judge were literally threatened when they were considering whether to go paper ballots. They received written threats. You're going to ruin your county. You'll never get any more. We'll make sure you don't ever get any more grants. You're going to These paper ballots are going to bankrupt your county because they're going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were threatened with the loss of money, with the loss of help, with the loss of support. They were very brave to move forward and make the decision to go paper ballots anyway. Since then, now when we had our counting day, we had 2 people from the state board came down to watch our counting, which I think is probably wise on their part. Let's see how the county's doing it. Let's make sure everything is according to law. And so we were glad to have them there. They took a lot of pictures. They looked at our paperwork. They asked us questions about what we were doing. We were very pleased that they cared enough to come. Now, I will say we did not have, there was a lot of negative media about paper ballots. There was not one reporter there, not even our local newspaper reporter, not one came to see the counting of the hand counting of the paper ballots. There were people from the AAC who were very negative and made threats. They did not come to see it. There were legislators who just thought it was a horrible idea that nobody could count paper ballots correctly. They did not come to see whether it was feasible or possible or not. But that's okay because we were there. And we did what we knew to do, and we're very proud of what we did.
Well, and I'm proud of y'all too, and everybody in your county, all your poll workers, everybody doing a great job. And it really is a shame that the people who were fighting you tooth and nail before you made the decision, and they were doing everything they possibly could to threaten, to twist your arm, and everybody in the county to not do it. In fact, they even, from my understanding, put some people up to run against some of the JPs that voted yes. And they were trying to put people up against them to get them out of office. So my question is, why would anybody in Little Rock or anywhere care how the people in Searcy County vote? But apparently they are doing everything they can to protect the machines and the machine manufacturer and to make sure that those stay in Arkansas, when we all know that they don't need to be there. And you guys, what you've done is served as a huge example of why we have to go to paper ballots. So I've got a couple of minutes left, actually about a minute. Could you tell me about post-election? Okay, what else kind of punishment have you been faced with here?
I'll tell you quickly because you're almost out of time on this segment, but after we had the 2 people from the state come the whole day and watch us count, again, we're very happy to have them there. Glad they came. Then on the first day, we had a runoff. On the first day of early voting for our runoff, we received a FOIA request from the state board. It was 4 typed pages long, requesting a mountain of documents. every time they've ever called me and asked me for information, I've gotten it to them. They didn't have to FOIA us. It was a huge burden on our team to have to respond to that FOIA and put together that mountain of paperwork. It was huge. I did not consider it to be a friendly move. And I don't think it was intended to be friendly. And then on the day that we had our actual runoff election, we had 2 more state people, one who sat and harassed our poll workers. As a matter of fact, they told me how pressured they felt by this woman coming in, sitting down at the table with them and questioning them over and over again while they were trying to work the poll. And we had someone else who came who was watching our counting process again. And now we are being audited. I guess that we were randomly selected for the 2nd year in a row to be one of the 15 counties to be audited. We're happy to be audited. We have our paperwork. It's in order. Come audit us. But I will say this. I think it's too bad to put so much pressure on a group of people who are working so hard to try to have a quality election, to do things right, to have no help at all, and to have that kind of interference in what they're trying to do.
Yeah, it's clear. It's a punishment. And basically, they're saying, for those of you who don't know what FOIA is, it's a Freedom of Information request. And they got 4 pages of questions for this little county of all the things and it was just to burden their staff. It's obvious to burden their staff with questions for having the gall, for having whatever to go to paper ballots. And that's why our state is punishing them. This is criminal, and it should never happen. Listen, I love talking with you, Laurie. What y'all have done has been incredible up there in Searcy County. We're so proud of you, and you are the example for all the other 74 counties left that need to go to paper ballots. Thank you for coming on the show, and I hope you come back.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. I'm Colonel Conrad Reynolds.
Anytime.
Absolutely. I'm Colonel Conrad Reynolds with the Colonel of Truth. Come back next week. We're going to have a great show. Thank you. Give this video a thumbs up, if you will. Like and subscribe to our channel. Very important for us to spread this message to everybody, and I can't do it without your help. This is the Colonel of Truth, and I'm Colonel Conrad Reynolds, and thank you for joining us.